This is me getting ready to go write the Butter Book, which is what I call my YA fantasy novel that we named back in October 2023, based on seven-figure fiction, and how that book says that tropes and universal fantasies are the sort of butter that makes a book taste good. After that last vlog, where I'd finally started writing that first draft after months and months of struggling to get started, I really thought it would get easier from there, right? Wrong. I almost immediately fell behind on that schedule that I'd set for myself, and instead of writing every weekday like I'd planned, I didn't write another word. And then the weekend was super busy, so instead of having 3,000 words at the end of the week like I'd hoped for, I ended the week with like still just 500-ish words. So on Monday, did I go and write, 3,000 words to catch up? You would think so, but no. There's something about feeling behind where it just makes you procrastinate more and make things even worse. Let me know if you know what I'm talking about. Because instead of working, I just fiddled around, did some dishes, scrolled TikTok, you know what I mean? And then I was like, shoot, I've used up an hour and a half. I might as well just scrap this one, right? This is what feeling behind does to me. It's fully in my head. It's a self-imposed deadline, which we're going to talk about, but it leads to me feeling so much guilt and feeling creatively blocked because I'm too busy feeling behind. So let's talk about it. Before I even go further, I should say that there's feeling behind in like a day, but then there's feeling behind on the week or on the month or even just like on life in general, right? On these big overarching goals that we set for ourselves where we just kind of feel like we missed the boat. And my pastor actually just talked about this a couple weeks ago in a sermon where he said that it's super, super common for people to say, I'm too old or it's too late for me, and how that's fear talking, which is really, really fascinating. And for those of you who are interested, I'm going to link that message below because it was just so, so good. There were so many stories from the Bible and from like in the last 100 years even. There was one really cool story about the gal who did the artwork for the Hallmark cards. Like if you've ever seen one, which I'm guessing a lot of you have, she actually started painting those after she was 80 years old, okay? That dream came, instead of her going, my life is over, it's too late for me, she started something really exciting and it bloomed into something that ended up making her millions of dollars. And she's still around today, and she like made it into the Times or something like that. And anyway, you should watch, again, the sermon I'll link below. But it just was really encouraging and such a good reminder that very often, not always, but very often when we feel like we're too late, we feel like we're behind, we feel like we're too old to do something, to have some kind of dream, it's very often what he called a self-imposed timeline, which means it's not based on reality, it's not based in your circumstances, it's in your head a lot of times, not always. But in this case for me, it absolutely was. Does that mean that my setting a deadline for myself was a bad idea? No, I do not think that. And there's so many comments I've gotten over the years, because if you've been following along, you know that I love my deadlines. They usually work well for me. But there's a lot of people who don't have good experiences, maybe because something like what happened to me last week, where it made them feel behind, it made them feel like a failure, it made them feel like I might as well just give up. And I get that. I really, really do. But I actually think deadlines are pretty much a neutral tool, because for people like me, I think it really does depend on personality and circumstances and a lot of other factors. But for me, if I don't have a deadline, I just don't work at all. And as you saw in my last vlog, I didn't set a deadline and ended up going longer than I ever had in my entire career so far without writing because of that. So I know that deadlines are valuable to me. But does that mean that my options are just zero progress without a deadline or feeling guilty the whole time with one? I don't think so. I really, really do think that we can get rid of this behindness feeling. I think the first issue that I see here is that we're believing it's impossible to get to our destination if the first path doesn't work out. Or maybe a better way to say that, more simple, would be we're believing that there's only one way to get where we want to go, which is silly. Deadlines can be changed. If we fall behind, we can catch up pretty easily sometimes, or we can just move that deadline and still get there, just at a different time than we first wanted. And this kind of goes along with that. The second thing I was thinking about is we put these unrealistic expectations on ourselves that are literally impossible to achieve. Then of course we're going to get frustrated. We're literally setting ourselves up for feeling guilty. There's this saying, something to do with relationships. Let's see how to go. Unmet expectations lead to frustration. And that was, again, something I heard for relationships, and it was really good advice there, because it's like, okay, shift your expectations and you won't be so frustrated in a relationship, right? That makes a lot of sense. But then why do we not do this when it comes to goals? Why do we think that we are the problem and not the expectations? What really helped me a lot this last week, and what I'm excited to show you in a second, is how shifting my expectations to being like, I am going to fall behind. I'm not always going to make my word count, and I might not make my deadline, but all of that's fine. Like, I'm kind of expecting it, and I'm still going to make progress. I am expecting to get there eventually, even if not on the exact date that I picked. And my theory is that doing this removes that guilt and that pressure and allows us to not feel creatively blocked, so that we can catch up faster and we have the freedom to stay excited about our story and not be swamped with all these other negative emotions along the way. So back to Monday, I caught myself in this guilt tripping and I stopped it in its tracks and I started to write in the last 30 minutes of that nap time. And somehow I wrote 693 words in just 30 minutes, which FYI is more than normal for me in that time frame. To be fair, it wasn't the 1,000 words a day goal. I did not technically make that goal, and I did not technically catch up. I was still behind, but it felt really good. And I started to get really excited about the story. So then Tuesday comes around and you're guessing that I just like got right into it, right? No, again, I just fell into the same trap where I was waffling around, wasted the first hour, and then I was like, well, probably too late now. I can't get in the zone in just 1 hour. He's probably gonna wake up from his nap right when I finally get into it. But I caught myself. And I remember the day before, which is kind of like a bonus tip that I didn't think to share, but it really helps to kind of look at your past track record and remind yourself, I've done this before. I can do this. And so after trying to talk myself out of it for about 20 minutes, I finally took that last 40 minutes and I was like, I'm gonna write. Who even cares how many words I get? I'm just gonna show up. And I wrote 1,114 words. Almost twice as much as the day before, which is wild. And it wasn't because they were perfect words, by the way. I have this whole like comment in my Word doc with a bullet point list of all the things that I want to come back and address and edit to make sure I do this and I do that and I add this and I add that. But the point is, I was able to stay in the flow and just like keep going. And there was just something about having fun with it that made it just go so much faster because I wasn't creatively blocked by all that guilt. Which leads to Wednesday when this was happening. My mom was watching my son for me and I was able to go out to a coffee shop and get a bunch of work done, including about an hour of writing on the Butter Book again. And this time around, I wrote 899 words. And I'm very excited to say that I solved kind of a issue that I was having. So if you know the story, you know the opening image, her family gets taken by the Fae, but she doesn't know that they're Fae. So I was like, well, how does she find out? Like, does somebody leave her a letter? Does somebody tell her? Does the neighbor see? Like, how? I don't write mystery. And I'm like, this is very much feeling like a mystery to me, and I'm not sure how to answer it. So then I had, it kind of just organically worked out that she was like searching the house, and then her father had scribbled something somewhere only she would see it, and then I was like searching like small fairies like brownies or leprechauns, and I was like, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter what this fairy is because she's not gonna know he's a fairy right from the get-go. I don't know, maybe I'm gonna have to make sure I make it clear that he's got like long hair covering his ears, because that would probably be a giveaway, right? But then I was like, okay, so is it like an old dude or is it like maybe a little kid? And I was picturing an old dude at first, like little leprechaun, creepy old man. I was like, that would probably freak her out too much. So randomly I started writing it and it was like a little kid who just showed up in her house and was like, who are you? And it was super fun to write that whole interaction, and he was just like weird the whole time, and she was getting all these like red flag, which I should use that word, that's a good word. But anyhow, I'm really excited about the direction that it went, and I wrote all the way up to the point where he runs, or like he looks like he's just leaving, like he decides she's not anybody important, so he leaves, and she's like watching him go just to make sure he like gets home safe, which was like a really good reason for her to watch where he went, and I didn't even intend for that, but I was like, yes, I love this. And then she watches him like go past the street, past the dead end, into the woods, and something like triggers like, that's weird. boom, chapter end. It like ends on a mini cliffhanger and you like want to know what happens. Where is he going? Why is he, this is odd. Something's off here. And also we're still wondering where her family is. And I think it's working, but I don't really care if it's working perfectly because that's a problem for editing Bethany. My goal is just to keep moving forward. And so I'm officially done with chapter 1. And it felt like a massive breakthrough. It was such a cool feeling. I'm pretty sure it kept me motivated to then continue on the next day and put a little bit more time in after, of course, waffling around yet again, because it's just a problem that I have. I don't know if that's ever going to stop. But during that nap time, I wrote 1,056 words and then managed another 786 words again on day 6. Technically, I looked at Pacemaker where I'm tracking everything, and I love how it actually adjusts your word count after you put in a new one. It'll adjust and say, okay, here's what your new daily word count is. It might be less, it might be more, depending on how much you got done. I noticed that I'm still technically behind, but it honestly doesn't feel like it because I'm making so much progress on the story. And it also doesn't feel like it because I can literally see that it's not that big of a difference, that literally just one Saturday possibly could be enough to catch up. So I sat down and I made a list of reasons why I feel like I was able to sort of kick that feeling behind feeling to the curb and get back into my story and be excited about it and not procrastinate or even worse, give up. And the first one we kind of touched on already. It's that goals and deadlines are almost always movable, even the ones that feel like they're set in stone. For example, I kept picturing myself with like a best-selling book, somehow publishing this before baby number 2 arrives. But the problem is I am already 20 weeks pregnant. I'm due in December. And honestly, that's not just unrealistic, but it would also kind of make me unhappy if I had a huge, massive to-do list for writing and editing and publishing a book. Meanwhile, my real top priority and the thing that will make me most happy is actually being healthy and taking time with my family and getting prepared for this baby. And did I say getting healthy? Because I need a lot of sleep right now. So a good place to start, I wrote down, would be asking ourselves, why do I need to get this done by this date? And having that self-reflection can really help us realize whether or not it's necessary. Like when I ask myself, why do I need to publish this book before baby is here? I don't. I absolutely don't. In fact, it would be really nice to have a book that's started already that I can kind of come back to after and feel like I have a starting place and something to work with. So asking myself, what is the worst thing that could happen if I change the deadline? The worst thing that could happen is I actually feel better about myself. I feel less sick because I'm taking time to sleep. It doesn't sound that bad, right? The second thing I also did touch on already, which was expecting to have bad days now and then, makes it easier to follow them up with good days and keep making progress. Again, just to put this in context, I am going to expect that I will need a nap at least once or twice a week, if not more than that. So I'm going to know and expect that even though I want to work every weekday, I actually won't be able to do that. And I'm just going to expect that some days that won't happen. And that really takes the pressure off because I also know and expect that I have the capability to make up for it on like a Saturday sometime, or even just go a little past the deadline, and it's not going to hurt anything to be a few days later than my deadline, which again is self-imposed. We'll talk about that too. Number 3, this is actually one of my favorites. Showing up consistently will make a much bigger impact than any single day by itself ever could. Another way I heard somebody phrase this was just, now is better than later, or done is better than perfect. Or if we're getting really, really basic here, we could just say a little bit done is better than nothing at all. All of that is true, and we know that, but it helps to really internalize it and be excited that, hey, a little progress is better than nothing. Number 4, it's often not nearly as hard as we think to catch up. This is one of the reasons that I decided to use Pacemaker instead of a paper calendar like I usually do to track my word count progress, because I love how, and this is not sponsored by the way, I just have used it in the past and I have this video, I'll link it below. It can adjust your word count every single day. Every time you put in how many words you do, it'll adjust the like goal for each day going forward. You can set it for certain days of the week. Obviously, you don't need this though. If you're able to mentally tell yourself, you know what, it's fine, my word count's gonna shift a little here, a little there. That's usually what I do, and I usually don't have as much guilt, but because I've not written in so long, I was really struggling, and so Pacemaker showed me that it upped my word count goal to 1,095 a day, and that's not that much. That's still totally doable, and that is something where if I wrote, say, another 1,000 on a Saturday, I could probably drop that daily word count back down to 1,000 pretty easily. And so that's kind of a very encouraging visual for me and why I was really enjoying that. But then my second note that I wrote down is we also have to remember writing is a muscle. And so you can even see this reflected in my work where I started out small at 500 and then it grew a little bit and it grew a little bit. And I managed to get past 1,000 words 2 different days. And I know that if I continue to keep going like this, and if I manage to start earlier on in the naps instead of the last half hour, then I could easily get 1,500, 2,000 even, maybe even more than that in just one day. And that could also really help me catch up. Number 5, our goals and deadlines are very often self-imposed and they might not even line up with reality. So I had a really good example for this because it occurred to me that I set my goal word count at 50,000 words, but very often my first drafts are underwritten and can be more like 30,000 or 35,000 words. So while I feel like I'm behind, if I end up having a shorter first draft overall, I'm probably actually ahead, even right now, which is a crazy thought. Or to go back to the sermon that I mentioned where my pastor was talking about how people often tell themselves this narrative of like, it's too late for me, or I'm too old. I was laughing because I was reading this book right here, Reckless. And this is book 2 in the series, but the author was talking about how she started the first book when she was 18, and I think she's 21 now, and she's already a New York Times bestseller. And I'm over here at 36, and I could easily be like, well, I guess I didn't make it. But is there actually an age limit on the New York Times bestseller list? No, of course not. So why do we act like there are age limits or there are, again, these weird deadlines that don't actually exist? Why do we do that to ourselves? And when I was thinking about that, it made me realize where a lot of our self-imposed deadlines do actually come from, which is number 6, comparison. Comparison is described as the thief of joy, and I also think that it's the killer of creativity. A good question to ask here, if you think this might be what you're dealing with, is when you're like, oh, I feel like I'm behind, start asking yourself, compared to who? Compared to who? That can open up your eyes to if you're trying to kind of follow someone else's timeline, because nobody's journey is the same. Nobody's life experience, nobody's skill set, nobody's history, just none of it is going to line up exactly the same. So there isn't actually any specific timeline that we need to be following besides our own. There's that saying, stay in your own lane. That definitely applies here. And last but not least, number 7 is another one that really helped me, which was reminding myself of the good, better, best method. I love this one. I first heard it from Sarah Cannon, who, by the way, her Heart Breathings channel has so many helpful mindset tips, and I definitely recommend it. But she talks about this in lots of different videos where she sets a good, better, and best goal so that you have a range to shoot for instead of a very narrow target. And that way, you know, you can aim for the best goal, like what you really, really want, but you can also aim for something that would still make you proud of yourself and some things in between. So let's apply this to the butter book. I had set a date of October 1st, right? And that was very arbitrary looking back on it. I think it was just because I was aiming for as soon as possible, so that would be my best goal. But a better goal, kind of the middle goal to shoot for, could be November 1st, right? So that would give me a whole nother month if I need it. And then the good goal, or like the kind of baseline that I'm like, I know I can do this, let's shoot for this for sure, would be basically any time in December before the baby is born. That's good. So good, better, best is what I'm going to shoot for. And that gives me wiggle room to not feel guilty if I don't hit October 1st exactly. Maybe it'll take till October 15th or October 29th. I don't know. But it gives me that freedom and flexibility. And again, it has something to do with those expectations we talked about too. It is just such a struggle to create when we feel this guilt and this frustration, overthinking that we're behind somehow. So I really, really hope this helped you. In the next vlog, I really want to chat more about the butter book itself because I have tons of fun things that have come up that I want to share. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions about that, because I don't know where exactly to start, but I want to chat about it more and share like, what did I not get into the first chapter? What do I have like my editing notes, and what did make it into the first chapter, and how messy is it, and character names, and my struggle with like trying to get fantasy into the book, which starts in a contemporary world, just like fun details like that, maybe even some excerpts if you guys are interested. So let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer some of your questions in the next one.